Corporate finance practice problem using Excel. Acquisition and tax carryover spread over multiple years. Get ready, it's time to take our chance with corporate finance. We are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we're in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab, in essence, being an answer key. Information on the left-hand side, going to populate that into the blue area on the right-hand side, looking at an acquisition type of situation, one company thinking about acquiring another. As they do so, the company that is to be acquired has a loss for tax purposes of the $700,000, which could be beneficial in the format of the acquisition if they can then take advantage or access the tax benefits related to the carryover. Typically, to do so, you would normally need to balance out the loss against income. Now, if you had the income in the current year to do that, then you could basically get the benefits of that tax carryover possibly in the first year. But if not, then you'd have to match it up and continue possibly carrying over that loss into the future. So we're going to imagine the carryover loss being the $700,000 and the earnings that we can then match it up to in year 1, 2, and 3 after the acquisition or merger being the $310,000, the $360,000, and the $416,000, respectively, the tax rate at the 30%. So that means we can't take the whole $700,000 in year 1, but need to basically allocate it out. As we think of doing that, if we were to then think about whether or not we should have the acquisition, we might then need to take into consideration the time value of money with regards to the benefit of the loss carryover. Let's first think about what the total loss carryover benefit might be. We'd have the carryover amounts. My fingers are on the wrong keys. Over would be the $700,000. The tax rate, so we're going to pick up the tax rate and say it's at 30%. So if we can access the whole $700,000 of the loss for tax benefits, let's make that a percent by going number tab, percentifying it, font group, underlining it. That would give us a tax benefit. The tax benefit, my finger's still on the wrong keys, 700,000 times the 30%, total benefit of the 210,000. But again, we're only going to get the benefit if we can match it up against income. So now we're going to take that 700,000, match it up to the income over the next 3 years. So let's think about the income before tax, which is going to be for year 1, the 310,000. And then we've got the tax loss carryover. And we have the 700,000 of the carryover that we can apply out, but we can only take up to 310,000 since that's our taxable income. I'm going to try to do this with like an if-then type of formula just to practice that a little bit so you can see what it would be just in terms of theory. I won't spend a lot of time on the if-then because this is not an Excel course, but we could do something like this, which could be useful in these kind of formats. We're going to say then equals if, and then we'll use the if formula here. We want to say if this cell is less than the 700,000, not the 210, but the 700 income, then I'm going to say comma. I usually say then when I hit the comma. We want you to take the smaller 310. If not, that's with the comma. That's what I usually say with the comma. Then we want you to take the 700,000 and enter. So there, that looks right. The 310 looks like right. Let's go ahead and say, well, what if this was like, what if this number, let's undo this. Hold on a second. Was 800,000, then it caps it at the 700. So it looks like it's doing what we would expect to do here. I'm going to undo that. So there we have it, if-then formula. Let's try it again. So that means that we're going to have left then this 700,000 minus the 310 that we took in year 1, 390 for year 2. The taxable income in year 2 happens to be 360,000. So that means that we're going to take the lesser of the two, which would be 360. Let's go ahead and do our if-then formula and see if we can come up to that number with the if formula. Equals the if, and then we're going to select the if formula. We want to pick up and say if this number is less than, and then I'm going to put brackets to recalculate that 390 less than the 700,000 minus the 310,000. I'm going to put brackets around that. Then, comma, with the then, the value should be then the 360,000. If it's not, then we want it to be, and I'm going to do that same calculation. We may not need the brackets. It would be the 700,000 minus the 310 or the 390,000. So I'm going to say okay, and it puts another bracket around at the end. That's fine. So there we have it. That looks correct. If I was to increase this to like 500,000, then it picks up the 390. It does what we would expect. I'm going to undo that. So it looks okay. Then in the third year, we now have left, we had the 390 before minus, we got this 360 that we used up. So there's 30,000 left. So obviously we would just be using that last 30,000 because we have 416. We take the lesser of the two. Let's try the if formula once again though. Say this equals if, shift 9. If this number is less than, then I'm going to do it this way and put brackets around it again. Well, we don't need the brackets. It's going to be the 700 minus the 310 minus the 360, which will end up with 30 brackets, comma. If that's the case, then use this number. If not, comma, then I'm going to do that same calculation, which will come up to the 30,000. Then take the 700 minus the 310 minus the 360, which would then be, it's going to put brackets at the end of it. Hold on a second. It wants brackets. It wants brackets here, possibly, and here. I may have put one bracket in there or something. And then closing it up. Okay, let's try that. There we have it, the 30,000. And if this was something under like 25,000, then it would be at 25,000. Undo that. So hopefully I didn't spend too much time on those if formulas, but they're useful sometimes. Equals the sum. And we'll sum these up this way. Equals the sum. Summing these up this way. So there's the carryover. And then we're going to subtract this out to give us our taxable income. Taxable income for year one is obviously 0. So we have 0 taxable income. The tax then, and I'm going to calculate this out even though it will be 0, which would be the 0 times the 30%, which of course will be 0. I'll calculate that out because it's useful to copy it across in like a table format. So the net tax income would then be the 0 minus the tax. So I'm going to calculate it once again, even though it's 0, so we can kind of see if I was to go back and look at it. And then the tax loss carryover, I'm going to add this back in now because the only reason we took it out is not because it should be there for book or cash flow purposes, but because it's a tax type of thing. So when I get back to like the book income or what could be there for us to distribute to the shareholders possibly for projecting this out, then we'd have to add it back in for the income after tax, which is going to be the 0 plus the 310. Let's put some underlines here. I'm going to select this whole column and underline here. I'm going to select this whole column and underline here. And then let's select this whole column and underline here. And these are rows, not columns. They're rows. Get it right. Okay. They're rows. Subtracting this one out, we're back to 0 again. The tax would be that 0 times the 30%. Or, of course, we can copy this one across. But if I was to do so, that 30% I don't want to move that one. So I'd have to make B11 an absolute reference. Remember that anything that's outside your table, that's often the case. So I'd have to go into that one and say F4 $ before the B and the 11. And then I can copy that one across if I wanted to do it that way. And then, of course, I can copy this one across, or I can recalculate as the taxable income minus the tax. And then we have the loss that we're going to copy back over, which is the 360. And then we're going to go ahead and add that back in. So there we have that. Year 3, subtracting this out, this would be the 416 minus the 30. Now we actually have some taxable income after we took the loss, because the loss is now ending here. We could also copy it across this way to use our autofill, and that should do the same calculation. The tax we can calculate as this number times the tax rate, such as this, or we can copy it across this way because this number is an absolute reference. So we can copy it across with the autofill if we want to do it in that format. Then we're going to go ahead and say that we have the 368 minus the tax. So that's the net income after taxes. once again, we could have copied it across this way as well. And that should give us the same calculation. And then we're going to bring back on down the loss carryover of the 30 to add it back, which again, we can copy it across this way if we needed to do it that way as well. And we can then say now we've got the 270 plus the 30,000 and adding those back up. So this is the income after taxes, which again, we could copy across this way as well. Now I'm just going to sum these up. So we're going to sum up the taxable income. Notice I'm including the 0, even though obviously this number is the only one impacting it, because I'd still want the formula to cover the whole table. And that's just good, practice with your tables here. So I'm going to pick up the whole thing. And you might say, well, why do I got to do 2 extra keystrokes to do that? Why don't I just pick up the 115.8? Because you want to do the whole table. Now this one you could copy this way, or you can recalculate it. I would prefer to recalculate it vertically to get back to that 270, 200. And then we've got the full amount here, which once again, I could pick up from the 700. But this one I would like to verify by copying it across horizontally, double checking that that gets back to that 700,000, proving that we have indeed taken into consideration the full 700,000. This one we can get the answer by taking the 270, 200 plus the 700,000, or we can sum across in this format, which we may actually want to double check just to make sure that our answer is populating the way that it should. And some of these numbers, again, if you have a table like this, double checking it in that way, adding it across a couple different ways could give you some added assurance feeling of a verification.